Hey everyone, it's Monday here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We've got Ray Fittipaldo on, and we got to talk about there was a coaching move made, kind of, in that it was announced that one of the Steelers assistant coaches will be gone. We'll talk about who that is, what other moves could be coming, free agent looks, and how the Steelers need to handle the running back position. That's next here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello, welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined here today by Ray Fittipaldo, one of our great Steelers beat writers. And as always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed, subscribe to this channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as the daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And as always, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Whether you're injured in a car accident or hurt on the job, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped injured victims for over 40 years recover more than $2 billion on their behalf. If you or a loved one have been seriously injured in an accident, call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Ray, let's talk about something that the Steelers that happened over the weekend. We've been waiting to hear how the coaching staff would change, what would look different, and we got at least the first notion that something would be different, and that Aaron Curry, the Steelers linebackers coach, signed with the Jets. He's leaving the team, but as we talked about, it seemed like the Steelers probably aren't going to be announcing firings. More so, there are guys whose contracts are running out who are probably going to be looking for new jobs, and the Steelers are going to be announcing replacements. Ray, what was your reaction of all the assistant coaches to go, Aaron Curry going? Because linebackers weren't elite for the Steelers this past year, but they certainly weren't the liability they had been in recent seasons.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, this is a cosmetic change. You know, when you end the season in the fashion the Steelers did, you have to do something. So I don't know if Mike Tomlin had it in his mind, you know, in the middle of the season that he wasn't going to bring back Curry, or if this is something he just had to do because of, you know, the end of the game season on a 5-game losing streak. But you're right. You know, Aaron Curry took over at a time where there was massive change within that linebackers room. He was hired, you know, the same year they let everyone go. They brought in Cole Holcomb. They brought in Landon Roberts. And the first year, then Holcomb gets hurt, and then they have to go out and sign Patrick Queen. So there was a lot of movement, a lot of moving parts, you know, that Curry had to deal with. And this year, Peyton Wilson comes, and, you know, he actually had a really good rookie year. So, yeah, on the surface, it doesn't look like he did a bad job with the inside linebackers. But, you know, I think, you know, this is probably something that Mike had in his mind after the season ended, and you know, Curry goes to the Jets, and Mike will be looking for a new linebackers coach.
And look, you know, there's always a difference too, because the outside linebackers coach / edge rushers coach has been Denzel Martin. He's been doing an upstanding job for some time, so it's reasonable to expect he'll probably be sticking around. But when it comes to Aaron Curry, I mean, you could say that yes, the miscommunications were part. You know, linebackers are part of the miscommunication issues that struck the Steelers at some of their toughest times of the season. So maybe there was something to move on from there. But I think people are just kind of maybe a little bit more anxious about, like, okay, but what's coming next? What are the other changes, and when is the other shoe going to drop? And I think it's reasonable to ask those questions. You know, Carl Dunbar is a guy who reportedly this was the last year of his contract. They haven't announced his extension if he's going to be sticking around. So does that mean that we're just waiting to hear if Carl Dunbar is going to get another job, if the Steelers are just letting him kind of hold the position, you know, on the team website until he finds another job? Or does that mean that they're working something out? I think those are the things that are kind of tough to tell right now with how the Steelers are playing this very close to the chest about what they want to do with their coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a complete dead time right now. You know, for the Steelers coaches, a lot of them did attend the Senior Bowl, and, you know, we're doing some scouting down there. But, you know, this time, early February, mid-February, before the Combine, Chris, I think this is when a lot of that stuff does go down. You definitely want to have your staff in place by the Combine. You want your position coaches to be involved all in those meetings out in Indy. You want them, you know, watching tape and on occasion even being on the scouting trail once the combine comes around in the weeks after leading up to the draft. So we'll have some clarity, I think, within the next, couple of weeks. I think Dunbar, as you said, is somebody that, could be on the hook here. There's some other positions. Eddie Faulkner's been around a while. Maybe they want to go in a new direction there. Alfredo has been here for a while. So, we'll see what happens. But I would expect one or two more moves to be made, before the combine gets here.
I think that's the thing, is just kind of waiting to see when those moves happen, what those moves entail, and also if they just might just hire other coaches. I mean, you look at their staff right now as it reads on their website. They have just on the defensive side of the ball, they have Teryl Austin, Grady Brown, the secondary coach, Carl Dunbar, the defensive line coach, but as we know, he's not officially retained moving forward. Denzel Martin, the outside linebackers coach. You have Anthony Midget, who's the assistant secondary coach, and then defensive quality control coach is Jason Brooks. But I mean, now you don't have a linebackers coach, you don't have a senior assistant, and you have a question about defensive line coach. Something that you and I, Ray, have been talking about is the importance of maybe adding more assistants that are at more of the senior level that can help with oversight, that can help connect the parts of the defense that need to play more, in concert. We talked about how, look, Teryl Austin, he's drawn up some very interesting secondaries, or schematics for his secondary to cut to mass coverages. But, in that, there's also been the complications of his blitzing packages have waned over the years. And in fact, the Steelers have gone from one of the highest blitzing teams where at the end of the Keith Butler era, when he was defensive coordinator, to one of the just kind of in the middle of the pack blitzing teams. And so I wonder if that's part of what the Steelers have to consider right now, is maybe if they get a linebackers coach, it's someone of the level and caliber that can be also more of a senior assistant, if they don't want to pay for that person and then pay for an additional senior assistant.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, before Teryl Austin took over, Keith Butler did oversee the linebackers as well as being the DC. I only bring this up, Chris, because they were on staff last year. I don't think they're ready for full-time positions, but both these guys did play inside linebacker for the Steelers. Ryan Shazier was on staff. He actually helped out Eddie Faulkner with the running backs this year. Vince Williams also on staff this year. None of those guys have ever been full-time assistants in the NFL. Doesn't mean the door is closed on them. Listen, they hired Joey Porter. And I think Joey only had 1 or 2 years of coaching experience at Colorado State before they hired him. So it's not a prerequisite that, you have previous experience. So, maybe we should leave the door open for that, but I like your idea better. Somebody who's got experience, somebody who could help, bring some new ideas. And I think that would be the way to go, rather than elevating one of those young guys who's never done it before.
And I think that's the thing, is that it's a nice story, and it would be amazing if Ryan Shazier, who his career ended on the field playing for the Steelers, giving it his all. It's amazing that he's coaching at all and he's walking and he's back in football at all. That's amazing. And it would be an awesome story if he was the inside linebackers coach. And who knows, Ryan Shazier, I thought one of his best things that went with his athleticism was his head. He was a very good thinker on the football field. He understood the complexities of how Keith Butler wanted to use him, and he was a weapon because of that. And I thought that was a big part of what made him really good. So I could see him becoming a good coach. But right now, the Steelers defense is in the position of rebuilding right now. They have a few pieces that they could rework, but they have the main tools there. And I think that's why they need to go get coaches that are just ready. They don't have to warm up to it. They come in knowing what they need to do. They can assess how the Steelers played last. They say, hey, Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson, Landon Roberts, this is what you guys did well. This is what you guys didn't do well. This is how we're going to work you better into the plan. Hey, Teryl Austin, I'm an experienced coach that's coached linebackers, and I've played linebacker for years in the NFL for years. That this is my perspective on this thing, and you're going to listen to this, and we're going to make this a little more complicated. But that's what I'm saying. A senior coach, I think that could that can bring you more than just the young guy who's rose up from being a player just recently and is trying to have that. I'd be interested in, hey, what would it be like if they went and got Jerod Mayo, who just got cut from the Patriots? I don't know if he's actually signed with anywhere just yet, but someone like that who's hey, they have experience overseeing higher duties. So now they come in, they can coach the specific position, but part of their duty is also hey, I'm here to not just coach this position, but to put it all together. And that's what I think the Steelers should be looking for.
Yeah, and listen, Mayo has never played or coached anywhere else. He's always been a Patriot. Obviously, he'll be looking for a job now. I like that idea. Bring somebody in who's been a part of successful teams and, see what he could add to your program. So there's a bunch of guys who are going to be out there like him. But, yeah, Mayo would be perfect because he played linebacker in the league.
Absolutely. I want to talk to you about free agency next, Ray. We'll do that here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. If you're injured in an accident, you're probably wondering what's next. Well, for over 40 years, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped injury victims answer that very question. Whether it's gathering evidence, collecting medical records, or dealing with the insurance companies, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped over 75,000 people handle the question, what's next? Call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. Remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's talk about free agency and just a very early look at things. Now, a reminder, this is early February, literally the 3rd of February that this show is coming out to you. So that means that we don't know what free agency will ultimately look like. There's players that are out there right now, technically, who will be pulled back because they'll be franchise tagged and they won't be available. There's players who aren't out there right now because their team hasn't cut them yet, and a lot of times that's how it changes the field and the outlook. But Ray, you and I have talked about the Steelers' big needs: wide receiver, running back, cornerback, D line. You could even say offensive line as well, whether it's guard or maybe you think if you're moving Faltano to guard, you go tackle. So there's there. And then, of course, they still need to sign quarterback. And I think that's part of this, too, is how much does their quarterback signing, whether it's Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, take up of their salary cap. And a reminder, their salary cap right now officially sits around like 43-ish million. It can get boosted by a lot if they just let go Preston Smith and Larry Ogunjobi to about 60 million. So they do have space to go get guys. But as always, Ray, it can be tricky going and getting guys in the open market because you're bidding with other teams. And there's certain big names out there that probably won't be out there when it's time to actually hit free agency, like Tee Higgins, who coming off a really big year for the Bengals. Bengals probably not going to just let him hit free agency. They might franchise tag him and then trade him to make sure that a team like the Steelers doesn't nab him up, that they have to play twice a year. But when you look around the free agent market right now, Ray, are there names that pop out to you like, hey, if this guy stays in the market, this is the type of player the Steelers should be going after?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think it would be great if the Steelers went out and really were competitive and, spent a lot of money on a guy like Tee Higgins, but that's going to command, or he's going to command probably between, I'm guessing 25 and 30 million a year, to sign next season. And that would be a little bit out of character for what the Steelers have traditionally done in free agency. Now, I will note that, with Omar Khan and Andy Weidel in charge, it's been a little bit different. Patrick Queen last year was a larger contract than they would, typically do. Now there's certainly a need there because of what happened to Holcomb, but they went out and they, signed him for about $14 million per season on a 3-year deal. So, do they do that with a defensive tackle? You need somebody. If they're going to cut Ogunjobi, you're not going to count on a rookie to come in and start right away. So to me, that's probably your biggest free agent need. If you do cut Larry Ogunjobi, you're probably going to have to go out and spend, I'm guessing, between 12 and 17 million, maybe even 20 million if you want to get the top guy on the market on a starting defensive tackle. And, do you want to do that at this point, or do you want to maybe spend the bulk of your money on, a cornerback or, a receiver? But to me, when I look at this roster, and I'm assuming Ogunjobi is going to be gone because he underperformed on that contract. To me, D tackle was the biggest need right now. And I don't know who exactly is going to be out there. A bunch of those guys likely will be franchise tagged, but I'd like to see them spend their money there.
So some of those big names that are out there right now, officially as players who are available in free agency, if it was to start right now, a familiar name right here at the top of the list, Javon Hargrave from the Niners, he's on a voided contract right now, so he technically could be gotten but again, there's plenty of time to see how the Niners handle that situation. He's also coming off.
He's going to be 32, right? Yeah.
He's going to be 32 and coming off a season-ending injury. Big questions there. And Javon Hargrave also not necessarily always a nose for the Steelers. He was kind of more like a 3-tech because he was J-wobble. He was a smaller guy that was really quick and could get to certain spots. But the Steelers want a guy who can eat space, especially at that nose tackle position, so they could push Keanu Benton back out to the 3-tech, who could take on double teams. Other guys that are in D tackles that could potentially be there. 30-year-old DJ Jones from the Broncos, another 30-year-old BJ Hill from the Bengals, Javon Kinlaw, 28 years old from the Jets, guys like that, but again, you're talking about getting one of those guys. You're probably gonna have to kick up, around $10-ish million for that player, and that's a significant amount of money. And that's when you pay that kind of money for a D tackle, you're probably going to want to sign a corner. That's going to keep you from being in the big sweepstakes to get like one of the superstar players that hits free agency. And again, we're talking about Tee Higgins being one of them, Ray, but like, who knows? Every year it happens. Somebody gets released and everyone's like, whoa, and that shakes up the whole market. And then all of a sudden we're reshifting who's the priority in free agency.
Yeah, we haven't talked about this, but you brought it up. I really hadn't thought about it until you did. Chris, what if they would cut Ogunjobi and they would make Keanu Benton a full-time 3 technique, and then you bring in a cheaper nose in free agency? Those guys aren't going to be as expensive as 5 techniques or 3 techniques.
Right.
Bring in a big old 350-pounder. Maybe you pay that guy $5-7 million a year, and then maybe you draft a nose, and a nose that maybe has some flexibility, to move down the line as well. Maybe a guy in the 2nd or 3rd round. I don't know. That wouldn't be a bad idea. It's not, to me, it's not that Keanu Benton has been disappointing as a nose guard, but when you draft a guy in a 2nd round, I think you need a little bit more production out of that guy as a pass rusher. And let's face it, he's not that big, typical nose tackle in the 3-4 defense. He's more of a, was probably 295, 300 pounds, more of an athlete than a plugger I guess what I want to say. So
he's closer to Javon Hargrave than he is to say Casey Hampton.
Right. And they haven't had a guy like Hampton. So I guess what we're going to find out in a couple of weeks, Chris, is do they want that guy like Kenneth Grant, who's probably more in the mold of a Casey Hampton, or do they want to keep with like the tweeners and, we're going to play sub-package football and we're only in base 25% of the time, that old song and dance that they've been talking about for 10 years now. And then when they get the ball shoved down their throats, everyone's clamoring for a big 350-pound nose guard. So, we'll see if Andy maybe changes their mind on that. So that's going to be a discussion point in the coming weeks. But that's a good topic. I mean, Kenneth Grant is a guy, you hear his name late 1st round. And Andy did draft Jordan Davis. Now, I'm not the biggest, like the value of Jordan Davis going number 13 overall, I don't see it for his production. But that's the type of guy that Andy wants up front. And, maybe it'll be the same way with the Steelers too. Now, Grant's not going to go 13 overall, but he could be there at number 21 if the Steelers like him.
And that'll be interesting to see if that's the pace they want, right? Because if they want a guy that can be a game changer at the line of scrimmage, maybe they get a guy like that, or a guy like Walter Nolan, who now Kenneth Grant wasn't at the Senior Bowl this past weekend. Walter Nolan was, and he did impress people, and he moved up the draft boards a little bit in a lot of people's minds who study and rank those guys. I'm still not in the position where I can rank everything just yet. I'm doing my research and watching film and doing things like that. But I'm looking around and seeing like, hey, there's I like Kenneth Grant a lot. I think that if he was drafted by the Steelers at 21, he'd be a heck of a fit for what they need, and he'd be another young piece. He could be the potential 1-2 punch with Keanu Benton for years to come, and they could both continue to learn under Cam Heyward. So I think that could work here. But but to your point, if you want a guy that changes things right now, you could try to get one of those cheaper, just straight up nose tackles that's in the NFL. But again, like, looking at other positions, another position I think that they need to address is corner. And there's guys at cornerback right now that I think, could be game changers. Like, the guy that I have on the top of my list at cornerback right now is coming off the Vikings roster, Byron Murphy, a guy I loved coming out of the draft. I thought he was a really good corner back then. He's 27 years old. He's probably going to command some money because he made the Pro Bowl for the Vikings, and he was a pretty good piece for them. But if you're able to get a guy that you could just stick across from Joey Porter Jr., that way you could give Corey Trice more time to figure things out at cornerback behind him. A contract like that's like 3 years, maybe $10 to $12 million. That's something else that you could try to do to bring it in. Now, I don't know for sure if Byron Murphy would command around $10 to $12 million. I know his contract previously was, like a little around that. But I think that's where the Steelers need to be considering right now. What's their priority? Do they want to get one of those guys, D-tackle, or do they want to try to make a big splash at one of these receivers that are out there?
Now, Murphy, when he was coming out of Washington, really it was more of a slot corner. At least viewed that way in the draft. Now, I don't know exactly how the Vikings used him. Was he used more outside, or did he actually line up in the slot more? I guess, Chris, for the Steelers' sake, it really doesn't matter because, you're going to need somebody to go with Beanie Bishop in the slot. You're not just going to hand that to a guy like Beanie, and you also could use a guy on the outside too. So, whether Byron Murphy is a guy who can play both spots or just one spot, I think he's a good name to throw around because he was a first-round pick a few years back, and as you mentioned, he had some success in that Vikings defense.
Right. He did move around for the Vikings a bit this past year. He played wide corner and slot corner, kind of bumping around for him. And that's what they were hoping that they could get back in Cam Sutton. Of course, that never manifested, but they need a guy who's in their prime who can play like that. And if they can have a puzzle piece like that added to the secondary, whether they're in the slot or lining up outside or switching between both, that can go a lot for what they wanted to do in the secondary. Because I think that's one of the big things they missed this year was having, I think they have faith that Joey Porter Jr. will continue to rise up. Dante Jackson's back injury kind of stopped him from being more productive in the middle to late part of the season. And then Corey Trice, obviously ran into this was his first extended action in the NFL. He's a 7th round pick. It's going to take time for him to get used to things. But you get a guy like Byron Murphy, it then, gives you another puzzle piece to that defense that you can trick things up and you can, be better. You can be more pressing. You can be more aggressive with your corners and saying, hey, eliminate these receivers. And that way we could do some other kind of things on defense. There's a lot of different avenues that can go in free agency. And again, we still don't know the full roadmap, but we wanted to give you an early sense of who some of those targets were. Then we got to talk about, though, another thing that could involve the free agency, and that's the running back position, because as it stands right now, Najee Harris is setting to be hit free agency. And if the Steelers are going to replace him, should they go for it in free agency? Because Najee Harris just might be the best free agent running back right now. We'll talk about that and what the other options are here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by Savina's Kane and Gallucci. This update being brought to you by Savina's Kane and Gallucci. They're your mesothelioma and its bestest lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them today for a free consultation. That's Savina's Kane and Gallucci. We're also brought to you by Moon Township Honda, where you can get your new Honda vehicle at 5802 University Boulevard in Moon Township, Pennsylvania, or visit their website at moonhonda.com. Here's a message from our friends at Moon Township Honda.
We gave the all-electric Prologue EX class-leading passenger space. And we made its tech intuitive with Google built-in. Perhaps that's why we were named Best Overall EV and Hybrid Brand by Kelley Blue Book. It's nice when a dream comes together. Buy online, reserve from select dealers, or visit your local Honda dealer today.
We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. I pulled myself out there, Ray. But let's talk about the running back position. Najee Harris, of course, is set to be a free agent. The Steelers did not give him his 5th-year extension. A move that I still question, was this the right move? Because now you do have to reconsider how you address running back while you're trying to reconsider how you address corner, D tackle, wide receiver, maybe pieces on the offensive line. Now you're back in this position, but you are in a position where you could say, okay, let's look at free agency. Honestly, you look at free agency right now, the other names at the top of it are guys who are older than Najee Harris, like Aaron Jones. He'll be 31 this year. Nick Chubb will be 30 and coming off multiple major injuries. And then other guys who might, produce either at the level or lesser than Najee Harris, A.J. Dillon, Javonte Williams, Alexander Madison, guys that are around the same age, J.K. Dobbins, and guys that have more serious injury histories than Najee Harris. So with that being said, free agency might not be the move unless you want to just bring back Najee Harris for another year or two. And you might be looking to this draft class, but Ray, as a lot of people are pointing out, this might be a really good draft class to go get a running back, but just I don't think the Steelers should be doing it in the early rounds.
No, yeah. I mean, just draft a running back, Chris. I mean, you have Jalen Warren. You need somebody to go along with him, and then you need a number 3. Like the Steelers, for some reason, valued Cordero Patterson this year. They actually used their number 3 running back quite a bit, but you don't need one to play a lot of snaps. So just, focus on a running back in the draft. Say grab one by the 3rd or 4th round. And if you can't find a starting caliber running back in this draft, then shame on you, because this one is loaded with guys who should be able to step into the NFL and help right away. And running back is one position, Chris, where, there's not a big learning curve, right? I mean, you hand the ball off and you run to daylight. So I think that's the way to go. Of all of those guys you mentioned in free agency, I guess Javonte Williams maybe piques my interest a little bit if you can get him on the cheap. But, even so, I'd just be in favor of getting one like in the 3rd or 4th, 5th round and, just go from there.
I think that's the thing here is you're trying to find those guys that can fit there without spending too high, because I know some people are going to want, Ashton Jeanty. Jeanty's going in the 1st round. You're not trying to do that right now. Amari and Hampton out of North Carolina, a really talented player, but again, probably 1st round. Cam Scatabo even, who was, a lot of people loved throughout the season. You saw his heart and his fight, but you're probably looking at him in the 2nd round. I don't think that the Steelers really start looking at running back until even the 3rd round this year, maybe even the 4th round. And then when you get to that area, that's when you're starting to look at the Ohio State running backs like Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, the Kansas running back, Devin Neal, who I think had a really big week at the Senior Bowl. You can look at like Rashard Smith out of SMU, Damian Martinez out of Miami, and then even later in the draft, like Trevor Etienne out of Georgia. But I think it's also about what kind of running back do you want? Because, Ray, we've talked about, with the 1-2 punch of Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. Najee Harris was that hard runner that could fall forward, push forward, get you the tough yards, even when they weren't always there. Jalen Warren was more of the home run hitter who could hit the hole fast. He ran hard, but he was faster than Najee Harris. But we also knew that Jalen Warren wasn't as sturdy as Najee Harris when it came to managing injuries, and we saw that a bit this year with the time that he missed. So the question for me is, what do you get? Do you try to get a running back in this draft class that fits that mold that Najee Harris was, to keep a lightning and thunder type of deal? Or do you double down and say, hey, let's get another home run hitter, because it'd be nice to have 2 fast backs that make you scared?
Yeah, and I think there's a difference. Like with Jalen, I think he's like better with his quicks in space more so than just hitting the hole and running 70 yards. We don't really see him do that, right? I think he's actually, I view him more as a more dangerous player in the passing game out of the backfield, more so than as a home run hitter out of the backfield as a running back. But he's going to do both. His time is 2025. This is his chance to go out and shine. And I think you go out and get a guy who's like his 1B, a guy who, like Neal. I had Neal, I think, going in the 4th round in my mock draft a week or so ago. I think he'd be a perfect fit. Get that guy who has a little bit more juice than Najee. What Najee did was great. He can get you 3, 4, 5, 6 yards, but he wasn't that guy who was going to hit the big play for you. I think if you look around the league now, see what Barkley has done, you see how important the running game has become again in the NFL. I think big plays in the running game are just going to continue to be important, and I think you need a guy who can get those chunk plays. And like I said, there's plenty of those guys in this draft who can do that.
I think that's the thing, is you need playmakers in this offense, and adding another one would be useful. The question is when you do it and how you do it, because at this point the Steelers have a lot of other bigger needs to address it on their team. And I think if they go out there and they try to address running back with huge money. One, I don't think the player is out there to address with huge money, but two, then going out and addressing it with an early draft pick, then you're costing yourself a chance at a high value corner that can be with you for a long time, a high value D tackle, a high value receiver, all those positions that are of importance. And again, I think the other thing is that you don't have nobody in the backfield right now. You do have Jalen Warren, who you've seen play really well for you at times. So I'm with you. Investing around that and building that is the key, and not necessarily trying to completely get a person who's going to supplant Jaylen Warren in the backfield for the future.
Yeah, and listen, Jaylen Warren was an undrafted free agent. A lot of times, smaller guys, maybe for whatever reason, I don't know, can't even remember if Jaylen went to the combine, but maybe he didn't test well at Oklahoma State's pro day. But Chris, it was evident in his first training camp. You saw that guy running around. You're like, who is this guy? He's an undrafted free agent. Yeah. So there's in the scouting community sometimes, you can find gems. Eddie Faulkner was all over him in the draft process. So kudos to Eddie for getting him. Maybe they just wait and try to recreate that again. I don't think they will. I think they'll draft somebody. But my overall point is you could find running backs middle, late, and even after the draft. You don't have to spend early picks on running backs, especially now, given where the Steelers are right now in the rebuilding process with that offense.
Agreed entirely. We have a lot more to cover as this offseason continues. We will do so here in the North Shore Drive podcast. From Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo, thanks for tuning into the North Shore Drive podcast. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of these Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes, as well as the daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Post-Gazette. Back here Wednesday for the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.